Today, we're going to review, do you have an employee acceptable use policy? And as always, we're going to talk with Jim Slick about why your business needs an acceptable use policy. What is an acceptable use policy? And any other questions you can think about with regard to why your employees need to understand what's acceptable use. Go ahead, Jim,
Acceptable
take it
use.
away.
Good old acceptable use. It is a very important thing. The if you think about you're putting an employee in front of a computer, right? As a business owner or manager, supervisor, what have you, or how about even a fellow employee? How would you like to see a fellow employee? Well, I think I'll just play games, for 15 minutes and then maybe send 16 personal emails out, blah blah blah. Acceptable use is meant to be just that. What is acceptable to you as the business owner or business leader to allow the employee to do? Obviously they should be doing their instructed work, but you need to carve out what you don't want them to do. And that is it's extremely important because, again, if you start thinking about Bitcoin mining, right? I mean, that's not huge, but people are still doing that, or they're checking financials, their Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. We could go on and on. There's a bazillion platforms.
Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon. So if it's not business, that you really want to keep that out because, again, we're trying to minimize the security footprint, right? We want that. We want to be as safe as possible. We want the employee to do what they're supposed to do. So our time their time is as valuable, to us as humanly possible without making it a hostile work environment. But that's when I say, okay, now if you have a personal cell phone and they're allowed, and you have a guest network, let them connect to that, which is usually throttled back, right? And they don't get the full bandwidth, it gives a little chunk. um and then, if they want to check a Facebook message on their break on lunch, I mean, that becomes an HR issue, right? Do you want them to pull their phone out during work hours, or do they need to leave the building? Do they need to be on lunch? Do they need to be on their break? That's an HR thing, not an IT thing. um as far as acceptable use is concerned, we're concerned with what happens on the devices, the company or corporate devices that are given. And let's face it, these things are tools to get money made, to get business done. So
I guess also that the terminology of acceptable use would also incorporate, the use of not just the devices, yes, your computer and stuff, but like the corporate phones, the corporate, if you have a mobile phone or a tablet, a computer, the internet itself, how is the bandwidth being consumed? I think all of that as its totality needs to be
correct.
discussed, and with
Yeah,
your employees.
Internet of Things, right? I mean, it's anything that is corporate, that is used in the business for the business. And then what are those parameters? What are the guidelines, for use of each of those devices? So yeah, I use the PC because it was the easiest to do. But if it's a corporate cell phone, if it's a corporate tablet, how about the copier, the printers? Do you really want somebody printing out 6 reams of paper a day? Especially to do it for their kids' homecoming flyer or whatever. I mean, no, you don't. That's crazy. Do you mind them printing, a couple of sheets here and there? No, of course not. That to me is, fine, but acceptable, right? Acceptable use. It's not. There's no hard and fast.
In today, 2023 and beyond, what do you think are those things that we might not necessarily think of, but that should be considered nah, don't do it, in your opinion?
Well, I mentioned the TikTok thing. That seems to be a big Facebook, right? Yeah, let's pick on Facebook. I mean, so many people are on Facebook, and I think I don't think there's anything wrong with Facebook, but it doesn't belong at work. It's a personal thing, right? I mean, would you, I'm trying to give a great, better example, than this, but for lack of not being able to think overly fast at the moment, at this hour in the day, um, it is you wouldn't want somebody sitting there and playing solitaire on your dime when work needs to be done. Um, you wouldn't want somebody going and tossing cornhole bean bags, in the hallway, right? I mean, if there's a an HR thing that says the department says, well, yeah, I mean, like I worked Blue Cross, when I was working on their data center. They actually had a foosball table, in their little break room. So, and it was perfectly acceptable any time of the day to go in there and just, clear your head and play a game of foosball. Now, I'm sure if you were in there for 4 hours straight, you'd get a talking to from somebody. I know I would have done that.
Yeah,
But yeah, it just, again, acceptable use. What's acceptable use? So that that's not an IT thing, acceptable use for IT, but that's still an acceptable. What's acceptable use of this particular, this foosball table? What do you expect to be done? What can be done? What
What can't
be
be
done?
done.
I
I
think
think there needs to be a clear delineation.
so that being that the case, do you believe that there should be a written policy what the acceptable use parameters are?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If
And
the minute you don't put something on paper and have somebody sign off on it, you're dooming yourself, right? I mean, it's you've got to you want to keep everybody honest, because let's face it, if the person offends, and they get their verbal, and then they offend again, and and then they get their second verbal, they offend a third time, they get their written, they offend a fourth time. So yeah, I mean, it gives you that policy to be able to say that this is what's acceptable, this is what's not, and move on. So no, absolutely, that should be a document that every employee should sign, and every company should have.
and what do you think that the mechanism is for? Is that something that should be reviewed by management on a yearly, quarterly? What kind of what do you think that looks like for new devices, new things, new software, new whatever it is becomes available all the time?
I think annual is sufficient. I really do. If you start pushing, sooner or earlier, or more than that, more frequent than that, I think you're just looking, to torment yourself. Annual, at best, maybe even every 18 months, I think it could be sufficient. I mean, yes, there are new things that come out, et cetera. But again, the acceptable use policy is going to use guidelines. So I had mentioned Facebook before. You could simply say, social media platforms are not allowed, during corporate hours on corporate machines. Well, you just covered any new social media platform comes in. So this should be done. It should be reviewed by your corporate attorney for sure, because you want to make sure you're not stepping, or violating any, HR rights, or human rights, or employee rights. So, yeah, I mean, draft it up, get it over to the attorney, but the draft, by the way, to me, it's got to come top down. But you need to let other eyes on it as well, IT eyes, HR. I think everybody should, in the general guidance of people and machines, they should all have a fair shot at saying, because you maybe forgot something, right? Oh yeah, I forgot this,
Yeah,
or I forgot that piece. Like you mentioned IoT, and I almost forgot it or overlooked it, just for the conversation here. But that may be something that IT will catch that HR didn't, or if you follow me. So
I do. I think that something that also potentially gets overlooked is well, let's pick on Facebook because it's easy to pick on them. Or TikTok, easy
yeah,
to pick on these things because they become black holes of time. They suck you into them and you could be gone for, minutes or hours a day.
yeah,
But there are, even though that we want to say that there are things and applications that you use and you need to be working at work, but depending on the person's, this is at least from my perspective, the person's job description, the title or function within the organization, that they may or may not actually have a realistic use for Facebook. I know we have in the past internally here have reached out to companies to their customer service and not been able to get customer service via the telephone or their own web page chat mechanism, but bang on them on Facebook, or another tool, and suddenly within a few minutes you're getting a phone call back that, hey, we need help support wise.
So if you use the verbiage, social media platforms not related to business activities, there you go. you just solved again. That's what the attorney's for, right? Because there are absolutely, you just mentioned. I mean, we've done this many times. Where Facebook can be a more heard platform. When there's no
It's
telephone.
powerful. It's powerful.
It
I know there are certain companies that we've had to deal with customer service wise, and we scratch them a little bit on social media, and suddenly everybody's paying attention. You're getting calls from
Right.
from management types.
Yeah, precisely. It's a little bit there goes a long way.
Yeah. So anything else you can think of with regard to? I did think of something. So what? Obviously, we want to say that this is something that we should or we shouldn't do, and there's a policy. So what from the IT perspective, how are you measuring this? How are you quantifying that? Okay, I have this piece of paper, but management says, well, you're not allowed to use it. And for the people who are, they have those exceptions for business use. But okay, now tell me how, from IT's perspective, how can you justify to leadership that the policy is being followed, or you have offenders? What's that? How are you doing that?
Well, the only way is to use software that tracks all web activity, right? I mean, that's pretty much the only way to do that. And there are a ton of platforms that can and will do that for you. Yes, there's a cost for that. Used to be, long time it used to be very, very expensive. Now it's come way down in price. But yeah, it's trackable, it's traceable down to the employee, down to the split second of time and date. Yeah, that's the way to do it. Real simple.
Okay, so I guess that was a pretty short one. I think that kind of wraps it up from that perspective, unless you have something else.
Nope, I'm good.
If anybody has any questions, what do you recommend that they do before they implement or review the policy that they have, or hey, and they never had it, and maybe this is something that they want to do because they feel like team members aren't getting enough done or they're not being effective. What do you want them to do?
Oh, it's certainly talk to your MSP. We're certainly a source as well. You could always reach out to us. There are sample policies that you can download on the web. We have a couple that we use infrequently, but still, because every corporate environment's different. They want to use their own or have their attorney draft one up. But again, the key is make sure you speak legal, right? At the end all be all, it's got to go through them and get stamp of approval. It's all good. So, but yeah, I mean, if you do want to talk to us, we'd love to talk to you about that or the software that can monitor and other things. Sales at slickcybersystems.com. Web, obviously. You can give us a call, 570-215-8888. And geez, I mean, they're probably the two most effective ways, to get in touch with us. Visit us on the web, www.slickcybersystems.com as well.
All there right on screen for you.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else for Jim?
I'm all good.
All right. Thanks for your help.
Be good.
Bye-bye.